At our first press conference, I was adamant that no politicians would be allowed to speak. This was intended to be a time for the community to have the microphone. Don't misunderstand me. Leaders and city and county bureaus were all eager to come, but when I said they would have to stand in the audience and listen, only one leader came. We spoke in this first press conference about cities and neighborhoods as ecosystems, and they must be in balance to survive. You don't want a neighborhood that is any one thing, because too much of any one thing is what crumbles a neighborhood and a city. And business, nonprofit, institutional, and residential leaders must work together to proactively create and maintain that balance. We need a healthy mix of residential units for all incomes. We need daytime and nighttime businesses. We need food, retail, and service industries. We need nonprofit services, cultural institutions, and educational institutions. If any one of us cannot care beyond our own bubble or our own customer base or mission, we will never rebuild and rebalance our neighborhood ecosystem. And at this first press conference, we talked about how everyone living outside did not just lose their job or their house. Chronic homelessness versus episodic homelessness are drastically different. There's an Econ Northwest study on the Joint Office's website that differentiates between the two. Affordable housing is the best solution for the 80% of our houseless community that is episodically homeless and primarily unseen. But we need more creative solutions for our chronically houseless, those that you see outside every day. For so many, their mental health has left them with no agency, and they need a governmental safety net that will take care of them in safe, supportive housing, not a system that leaves them wandering the streets and vulnerable to both the elements and exploitation. For others, addiction has taken hold. I saw a TED Talk once about addiction where the speaker shared how addiction invariably originates in the human being's desperate attempt to solve a problem. The problem of emotional pain, of overwhelming stress, of lost connection, of lost control, of a deep discomfort with self. And he says the question is not why the addiction, but why the pain. And so in a similar way, our most addicted need a safe place of rest, care, and support to get to the root of the question of why the pain. This is a different version of mental health care, and I truly believe only then will we see our way through this crisis. At our second press conference after a string of homicides, we brought attention to the two groups living outside, the actually vulnerable and those preying on the vulnerable. Organized crime has moved to Portland, and it is thriving in places like Old Town. We have become unable to differentiate between the actually vulnerable and those preying on the vulnerable. Our community watches stabbings, gun violence, overdoses, and assaults almost daily. And almost 100% of the victims of those crimes are houseless. I never expected I would see this side of humanity, and I certainly never thought I would have to worry about being believed by the public. We ended that press conference with a desperate plea for urgent action by our leaders. And in between all of those press conferences, the mayor's office showed up for us. I've learned that when you're fighting for change, thank you for whoever was applauding. I've learned that when you're fighting for change, it's critical to acknowledge the wins. No one wants to work with anyone that ignores the good, and anyone that only calls out how the doer of deeds could have done them better. And so I want to take this moment to share with the City of Portland, Multnomah County, and the Old Town community that truly, the mayor's office showed up for us. They are navigating this process together with us and have gone to great lengths to try and make meaningful change using creative methods to help our community. I know the naysayers will find 1,000 reasons why these solutions aren't perfect, but I've told the mayor's office time and again, we cannot let perfect be the enemy of good. And a decision is better than no decision because it allows us to make a different and perhaps better decision. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler and allow him to share some of the good work they've done, the measurable data points they've collected, and to truly enjoy this moment of community support for the hard work he and his team have been navigating with us every day.
Well, I'd like to thank Jessie Burke for her kind comments and her leadership, as well as the Old Town Community Association for inviting me to be part of this press conference here today. Jessie, thank you for your dogged advocacy and your commitment to bringing more safety and compassion to Old Town. I want to acknowledge the progress we've made so far in Old Town, while also being very clear-eyed about the work that still remains ahead. Homelessness, crime, gun violence, litter, graffiti, and economic hardships for local businesses have posed a very real, very tangible threat to the livelihood and survival of Old Town, which, by the way, is Portland's oldest neighborhood. At its core, my administration is focused on constant vigilance and improvement in the way that the city operates. My team and I seek to have a pulse on what's going on in the city, and we're constantly looking for ways to improve the city's operations and services to tackle our city's most difficult problems. When it comes to emergency declarations, I'm repeatedly being asked the question, why are we taking action now? Our resources, as you're aware, were very limited until the pandemic restrictions were lifted after this spring. This gave us the opportunity to implement innovations at the scale and at the speed necessary to closely match the problems that we face. That's why a year ago, my administration began a series of problem solver meetings to engage with concerned members of the community. Jesse Burke, who, by the way, serves as the chair of the Old Town Community Association, attended our very first meeting to share the challenges that she faced while running a family-owned business located in the heart of the homeless crisis in Old Town. When we asked Jessie how our team could be more helpful, she asked, "How do you find the available number of shelter beds on any given day?" At that time, neither the City of Portland nor Multnomah County had a centralized database for identifying available shelter beds updated on a daily basis. On March 2nd of this year, I started the Street Services Coordination Center in partnership with Multnomah County through an emergency declaration. Prior to the activation of the Street Services Coordination Center, unsheltered Portlanders were met with a mishmash of available resources. They were required to call shelters one by one to find available space for that night. And if they were lucky enough to come in contact with one of the few navigation team members working at that time and were able to find a shelter bed, then they were given a bus ticket and asked to move their belongings on their own. No wonder why so few vulnerable Portlanders made it through this maze. The Old Town neighborhood has been disproportionately affected by the crises that are impacting Portland today. I know Portlanders want us to address these problems with compassion. Let me break down what a coordinated, compassionate response looks like. Our efforts began to make contact with everyone who is going to be moved via the campsite removal posting process. For the first time, we have one centralized system available to identify all shelter beds at any given time and one point of contact for individuals seeking those shelter beds. Those who we made contact with were offered a shelter bed that was available immediately, transportation to get them to that available shelter space, along with moving or storing their belongings when we had availability to do so. We've also developed an app that those in the field will use to track each intervention and service offered and received. This information will be aggregated and shared online for the public to be able to follow. I believe in a client-centered approach to homelessness, and my goal for the future is to have this newly developed app connect with the system used with the Joint Office of Homeless Services in real time. Along with our efforts to get better, more coordinated services out to where Portlanders experiencing homelessness are currently living, we've also increased camp removals. In the Old Town neighborhood since April, we removed 137 encampments. That is a 300% increase over last April. And in May, we removed 206 encampments for a 450% increase over last year. Since April 11th, we were able to make 175 contacts through our navigation outreach teams and 64 referrals to safe shelter in Old Town. I also sadly recognize that not everyone that we make contact with will accept our offer of shelter, therefore causing a ripple effect where unsheltered Portlanders moved from Old Town have now settled in other parts of the city like the Pearl District as well as the downtown core. These critical areas of the city also have the full attention of my administration. Right now, we're continuing outreach efforts. We're offering available shelter space and transportation to those living outside in both dangerous and squalid conditions. As I've said, through the Street Services Coordination Center partnership, we're constantly working to improve the services to Portlanders experiencing homelessness. We're seeing early positive results of those efforts. Reports show that more people are accepting shelter referrals and moving off the streets. I want to take this opportunity to thank Deborah Kafori, Chair of Multnomah County, as well as our Joint Office of Homeless Services team, with the county working with our community-based sheltered organizations to reserve 92 shelter beds daily for those engaging with our new Street Services Coordination Center, so that we know that beds will be available at the time when people are ready to use them. What this shows is that progress is possible through planning, coordinated resources, and collaboration. We're making a real difference in Old Town and the city as a whole. I want to thank the Old Town Community Association for leading the efforts in this neighborhood. I also want to acknowledge the many cultural organizations in this neighborhood that have been deeply impacted, such as the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, the Oregon Jewish Museum and Center for Holocaust Education, the Portland Chinatown Museum, and of course, the Lansu Chinese Garden, who graciously opened their doors to host us today. These institutions are integral to the city of Portland, and they've struggled to maintain their business operations as a result of a precipitous decline in the neighborhood. I'm proud to say we are turning the tide. I'm proud of the progress that we're making, and I look forward to bringing this action to all neighborhoods in the city of Portland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. I would like to welcome Portland Police Chief Chuck Lavelle to share how this collaborative work has changed the Police Bureau's work on the ground.
Thank you, Jesse. And first, thanks to everyone here. Thanks for having me here today. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I also want to thank everyone who's worked diligently to make improvements in Old Town. This is important work, and it's still continuing. I want to thank the mayor for his leadership on this issue. I also would like to give a special thanks to the Street Services Coordination Team, the Impact Reduction Program, Central Precinct Neighborhood Response Team, and bike officers. These officers have been building relationships and providing service in Old Town for many years. And I'm pleased to have a couple of them with us here today, Captain Rob Simon and Sergeant Matt Jacobson. I also feel it's important to remember those we lost in Old Town this year. Jaquan Jenkins, James Wise, Jennifer Drain, and Farz Gebrawat. PPB has made arrests in 2 of these homicides, and the investigation continues in the other 2 cases. I want to highlight some examples of the great work and collaboration that's been taking place here in Old Town. A highlight of this collaboration was a neighborhood response team officer partnering with Portland Street Response and Portland Fire to advocate for an adult protective service, or 2 adult protective services for a 66-year-old medically fragile female living on the street. Central Neighborhood Response Team leveraged contacts with outreach and service providers for background information and follow-up. Portland Fire assisted with coordinating transportation, and Portland Street Response assisted with developing rapport with the woman and accompanying her to a hospital. With this combined work, they were able to convince the woman to go to the hospital, which was the next step in securing her supportive housing. Central Precinct has assisted at numerous camp locations in Old Town during the last 60 days, each at the request of the Street Services Coordination Center and the Impact Reduction Program. Neighborhood Response Team officers work to support these city-ordered actions, which are led and directed by the Impact Reduction Program and their city contracted vendors. During this time, Central Neighborhood Response Team officers were able to offer emergency shelter beds to 22 people. Another highlight from the last 60 days is a Central Precinct bike officer building rapport with a witness to a violent incident in Old Town. The witness followed up with the officer about a week later, asked for help, and for a referral to shelter. The officer worked with Portland Police Bureau Service Coordination Team to secure a room for the witness in a Central City Concern housing program. These are just a few examples of the impactful work being done here in Old Town, and I'm happy to report between March 22nd and May 20th, reported drug offenses are down 51%, trespassing reports are down 93%, and vandalism reports have seen a decrease of 13% as compared to the preceding 60-day period. There is still work to do, but these indicators are trending in the right direction. I'm confident that our continued efforts will lead to improved livability and reduced crime. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for their efforts.
Thank you, Chief Lavelle. Those are amazing stats that I didn't even know about until right now, so good to know. And finally, I'd like to welcome my dear friend and neighbor business, Camila Adams, to speak about her experience as both a small business owner in Old Town and the need for further action.
Hi everyone, my name is Camila Adams. I'm the owner of Mimi's Fresh Teas. And Mimi's Fresh Teas is an apparel company which amplifies women empowerment and social justice. So my office slash showroom is right above Old Town Pizza. I moved in probably about a year ago, so I've seen a drastic change in Old Town where when I first moved in, there were quite a bit of tents everywhere you turned, and there was definitely a safety concern of mine, but I would like to say that I am proud to be a part of this community and the initiatives that all the business owner and Jesse and the mayor's office have put into place to change this cultural district. I always wondered why this cultural district, Old Town, Chinatown, was in the state that it's in. And I just thought that it was very disrespectful for the condition of this neighborhood to be allowed to remain, because businesses need to thrive. Businesses need to thrive, and we are all in this together. You know, I always say we are all one community and we have to build together. We have to put these initiatives in place, and I am grateful that it's happening because I have seen a change. And a friend of mine who is a house's neighbor, she just recently got housing, and I think we can applaud for that. She was right across the street from the building that I was in, and I've been looking for her, and so I asked a couple of her friends who are usually outside of Darcell's, and they said, oh, she got an apartment. So that really just warmed my heart. City Central Concern, from my understanding, helped her with that apartment. So there is some strong work getting done in this community. And that's all I got for today. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Camila. In closing, I want to share that I come to the table assuming everyone, regardless of your politics, is both progressive and compassionate, meaning you want things to be better than they were before, and you care about other people. You are all compassionate, and I know you want things to be better than they are now. This team of public employees that we've gathered, they are compassionate. Look around at everyone that is here today. They have shown up of their own free will in the middle of a workday because they care, because they are compassionate. Compassion is not just reserved for those that work in the nonprofit sector or the public sector. Compassion is for everyone, and it is compassionate to solve this problem. If anyone tells you, as they have told me, that you are not compassionate or you only care for or you're only motivated for personal gain, move on from that conversation. That person is not interested in solving this problem. I know it's hard to know who to believe. I know it's hard to know who is who. And know this, the organizations and agencies doing excellent work in this field come to the table with solutions. They provide meaningful insights and thoughtful ideas. They recognize the problems are hard and complex, and so too are the solutions, but they remain collaborators and look for the good in others' ideas. However, some spend their time only criticizing solutions. When looking for who is truly trying to solve this problem, look to those who are making progress towards their mission. There are some people who will spend most of their time discrediting any attempt at solving a problem, who will spend their time calling a person's character into question for making a suggestion, or who will oversimplify complex issues and boil them down to mind-boggling false equivalencies. This is not advocacy. This is apathy. We have both the ability and resource to solve these problems, but our community is held hostage by indecision and conflict, led by those who seek to either maintain the status quo or not make a move unless perfection is guaranteed. It is compassionate to try and find solutions, and with great urgency. It is apathetic to continue to find reasons why every idea won't work. Remember, some people gain if we fail to find a solution. We are better than this, and we are smarter than this. We are smarter than simply believing oversimplified and divisive articles published by extremist media publications. And remember, extremism, thank you. Extremism does not discriminate between the left and the right. It can be found on both sides, and we must not fall prey to the easy narrative extremism makes for us. I tell my kids who are here today, it's easy to be an extremist. It's lazy to be an extremist. It's hard to gather data and make thoughtful and informed decisions. Maybe what makes Portland weird now should be that we don't fall prey to the laziness of extremism that every other city has. We won't be so lazy as to believe that data collection and case management of our most vulnerable is the same as the Holocaust. We won't be so lazy as to believe that public safety only benefits one community, when truly everyone wants and deserves to be safe. We won't be so lazy as to believe that the only people that care to solve this problem work at nonprofits or government agencies, when the truth is we are a city of progressive, compassionate people of all professions and backgrounds ready to help. I want to thank the Old Town Community Association for allowing me to guide this district in this process. Thank you to Mayor Ted Wheeler and his team, in particular Sam Adams, Tom Miller, Nate Takara, Matthew Silva, and Micah Silva, Skylar Brocker-Knapp, and more, for your creative problem solving, your work to build relationships, and listening to us every week to come up with a better and better solution. Thank you to the Portland Police Bureau, the 2800s, Clean and Safe, and Echelon Private Security for showing up every day, being in this crisis with us, and continuing to want to help everyone you encounter and work toward a better Old Town. And finally, I want to thank my husband, Jonathan, and my children, Anouk, Julian, and Miette, and our staff at the hotels for allowing me to take so much time away from our family and my work to do whatever I could to help this community. All anyone wants is human connection, and I appreciate the opportunity to be so connected to all of you. Thank you.